When he looked at me and said, "You're late, young man," my stomach dropped. I thought my career had ended before it even started. I tried to explain myself and said, "I'm sorry, sir. I stopped to help someone on the freeway." That moment stayed with me for years because it showed how quickly things could go wrong in Hollywood. And for decades, people saw Clint Walker as the perfect cowboy hero, the strong, calm, fearless star of Cheyenne. But his daughter, Valerie Walker, has now revealed what was really happening behind the scenes, and her truth paints a much darker and more painful picture than anyone expected. To the world, Clint was a giant of a man with a heroic presence. But at home, his family lived through nights filled with fear, worry, and silence. Valerie says he struggled with drinking, suffered frightening blackouts, and sometimes disappeared for days without telling anyone where he was going or when he would return. There were hospital visits the public never heard about and moments where it felt like his life might end at any time. Valerie remembers sitting by the window, waiting and wondering if her father would walk back through the door alive. She carried that fear throughout her childhood. Now, for the first time, she is speaking openly about it, explaining why Hollywood tried so hard to hide the truth. The studios needed him to look strong, controlled, and perfect, so they buried anything that didn't fit the heroic image they created for him. Clint Walker wasn't born into an easy life. He entered the world as Norman Eugene Walker on May 30, 1927, in Hartford, Illinois. His mother, Gladys, was a Czech immigrant who had already separated from her husband just 8 months into their marriage. She gave birth to twins, Clint and his sister Lucy, during the years of the Great Depression when the whole country was struggling to survive. Their home life was broken and unstable. Gladys moved constantly, looking for any job she could find, a kitchen job in one town, cleaning work in another, just to keep her children fed. Clint learned at an early age that life didn't wait for you to grow up. If you wanted to eat, you had to work. He had Cherokee ancestry, which gave him a deep sense of pride, but pride didn't pay bills. By the age of 10, he dropped out of school and started working wherever someone would hire him. He spent long hours in noisy factories with heavy machinery, then shifted to rough jobs on Mississippi riverboats where the work was dirty, the pay was small, and the hours were endless. But he kept going because he didn't have a choice. He grew fast and became strong from the hard labor, not from any gym. By 16, he had worked as a factory worker, boatman, carnival laborer, and even a golf caddy. Every job left him more experienced, more disciplined, and more mature than most men twice his age. By the time he was old enough to shave, he was already 6 feet 6 inches tall and built like a wall. At 17, near the end of World War II in late 1944, Clint joined the United States Merchant Marine. The war was still deadly and dangerous. Enemy submarines hunted supply ships across the Atlantic, and storms threatened every voyage. Clint knew all this, but he signed up anyway because he wanted to help his country and find purpose. He didn't see direct combat like soldiers on the front lines, but he sailed through enemy zones, fought rough seas, and saw the effects of war up close. He watched the world change as the war ended in 1945, and when he came home, he carried a new understanding of himself. But war doesn't make life easier. It only changes the way you face it. After leaving the service in 1946, he moved to Brownwood, Texas, where he took a difficult job in a foundry welding aircraft parts. The heat burned his skin, sparks flew into his arms, and the work felt endless. His hands became covered in small scars, and every shift left him exhausted. Still, he kept going. The pay was low, but he saved whatever little he earned. Complaining wasn't in his nature. He was used to pain, used to work, used to pushing through. In 1947, hoping for something better, he moved west to Long Beach, California. There he joined oil rig crews where men handled heavy steel pipes through wind, rain, and blazing heat. The pay was better than the foundry, but the danger was worse. One slip could get a man crushed. Clint didn't talk much about himself. He kept quiet, showed up early, worked late, and saved every dollar he could. Some days, he skipped meals not because he wanted to but because rent and survival came first. His life aged him faster than time. In 1948, he ended up in Las Vegas and took a job as a doorman at the Sands Hotel. His 6'6" frame made him look like a statue guarding the door. He stood near famous names like Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, keeping rowdy guests in line and watching the chaos of Vegas nightlife unfold every night. One evening, a Hollywood scout noticed him. The scout didn't ask if Clint could act. He didn't care. He saw the height, the face, the calm strength, and he knew he had found something special. But Hollywood still wasn't Clint's focus. In 1950, when the Korean War began, he signed up again with the Merchant Marine. At 23, he was back at sea, shipping supplies across dangerous waters. His ship sailed through violent typhoons, and twice they nearly sank. One storm off the Korean coast almost took them down completely. Clint later said that moment changed him. It made him think about what he still wanted from life and what he would do if he survived. When he finally returned home, he was ready to leave danger behind and look toward a future with more meaning. In 1954, everything changed when talent agent Henry Wilson discovered him. Wilson was famous for finding big stars like Rock Hudson. He liked big men with strong faces, and Clint fit that image perfectly. Wilson arranged a screen test and handed Clint a Western script. Clint had never acted in his life, but when he read the lines, his deep voice, calm attitude, and powerful presence immediately caught attention. Wilson renamed him Clint Walker and signed him on the spot. Within days, Warner Brothers offered him a contract. In 1955, Clint moved to Los Angeles. But before they put him in front of a camera, the studio sent him to cowboy school. It wasn't just riding horses for fun. He trained for hours every day learning to fall safely, shoot correctly, fight convincingly, and move like a real cowboy. He worked with stunt men who pushed him to the limit, and more than once he went home bruised and bleeding. But he always got back up. Years of hard labor had already taught him how to endure pain. Every experience, the foundry, the oil rigs, the ships in wartime, prepared him for this moment. When Cheyenne finally aired on September 20, 1955, everything changed overnight. The first episode, Mountain Fortress, featured a snowy mountain battle that looked so real that over 10 million people tuned in. Clint's character stood strong against danger, calm and steady, and audiences loved him instantly. The show introduced the first hour-long Western format on television, and it felt like watching a movie every week. Clint became the face of a new era. The show often used his real-life experience. In the 1956 episode The Northern Story, he played a scout navigating dangerous rivers and harsh terrain. They filmed in freezing Utah waters, and some actors got sick. Clint didn't. He had survived icy seas and brutal storms. He did his own stunts, shivering and soaked, but completely committed. Viewers felt the authenticity through the screen. Not everyone believed in him at first. Warner Brothers thought his deep baritone voice was too much for TV, so they dubbed him in the first 2 episodes with another actor. Fans hated it and flooded the studio with angry letters. By the 3rd episode, they restored Clint's real voice. It was one of the first times in TV history that fan backlash forced a studio to change a major decision. Clint earned respect not just for his acting but for his integrity. In 1956, while filming The Border Patrol, a stuntman was badly injured. Clint refused to continue filming until the set had better safety equipment. The studio resisted, but Clint didn't back down. Eventually, new safety rules were put in place, and those improvements later influenced the entire industry. Clint didn't do it to be a hero. He simply didn't want anyone else getting hurt. The show grew, and so did Clint's fame. In 1957's Duel at Sundown, he filmed a scene facing 3 gunmen in one continuous take. No cuts. No do-overs. He hit every mark perfectly. The audience loved it, and his pay rose to $1,500 per episode, a huge amount at the time. Over 7 seasons, Cheyenne aired 108 episodes and became one of the most influential Western shows in television history. Clint Walker went from a poor boy in Illinois to a tough laborer to a wartime sailor, and then to one of the biggest stars on TV. He never needed a stunt double. In 1960's The Long Rope, he worked in brutal heat and even collapsed from exhaustion after wrangling a stampede of 200 cattle across the Arizona desert. But he completed the scene first. That episode pushed the show into the top 10 nationwide. His commitment made viewers believe every moment. 2 years later, while filming for the War Wagon storyline, he was thrown from a horse during a nighttime scene and broke a rib. Instead of stopping production, he pushed through the pain and finished the scene. That injury added a raw edge to his performance. Fans felt the intensity, unaware he was filming through real agony. But Cheyenne wasn't just action. Some episodes carried deeper meaning. Gold Hill from 1959 highlighted a corrupt mining scam, mirroring real labor disputes happening in Texas. Viewers were shocked to see such serious issues in a Western, but the episode became one of the show's most talked about stories. Then in 1960, during the Lone Gun episode, a knife fight scene fell apart when the script got shortened. Clint improvised and used a real blade to cut through ropes during the final moment. That unscripted intensity made the episode stand out and eventually led to an Emmy nomination. In 1961, Clint made a crossover appearance on Gunsmoke in The Man from Bod. Instead of studio tricks, he rode real horses through the New Mexico wilderness. His dedication helped boost ratings for both Cheyenne and Gunsmoke. It proved Clint wasn't just following the Western trend, he was leading it. But behind his strong on-screen presence, the struggles Valerie now describes were growing. The drinking got worse. The blackouts became more frequent. Some nights he never came home. Other nights he came home but didn't remember anything the next day. Hollywood executives ignored the warning signs because he made them money. They covered up hospital visits, kept stories out of newspapers, and protected his public image. But they didn't protect him, and they didn't protect the people who loved him. Valerie remembers waiting for him, scared and exhausted, listening for the sound of his truck pulling into the driveway. She remembers her mother trying to stay calm, hiding her fear, hoping the phone wouldn't ring with bad news. She remembers nights when he came home angry, confused, or haunted by things he never spoke about. She never blamed him, but she lived through the consequences. Hollywood hid his struggles because they needed him to look invincible. But behind the curtain, he was just a man fighting battles no one knew about. Today, Valerie is finally sharing the truth, not to damage his legacy, but to show that even the strongest heroes have human lives behind their roles. Clint Walker was a giant on screen, but he was still someone who carried trauma, pressure, pain, and fear. The world saw the cowboy. His family saw the man. And her story adds the chapter Hollywood didn't want anyone to read. He brought the same energy and strength from television to the big screen. In 1958, the movie Fort Dobbs became his $500,000 chance to prove himself as a real film star. At first, Warner Brothers didn't think he could carry a movie. They assumed he was only good for TV. But by the time the movie finished filming, he had changed every single mind on the set. He did all his own chases, fights, and stunt work without asking for help. Nothing was faked. He played Gar Davis, a man running from the law through the rocky badlands of Wyoming, and his performance helped the film earn more than $2 million at the box office. For a small-budget Western, that was a major success. Clint Walker knew that audiences wanted real action, not camera tricks, and with his height, strength, and real-life toughness, he refused to use a double. A year later, in Yellowstone Kelly, he faced an even more dangerous challenge. One of the biggest scenes involved a grizzly bear attack. The bear was trained, but it was still wild enough that no one could fully control its movements. During the fight scene, a prop claw that was supposed to look fake ended up tearing through his costume and scratching his real skin. His arms were cut open. But Clint didn't stop. He didn't back away. He kept acting as if nothing had happened. Director Gordon Douglas wanted the moment to feel real, and Clint gave him exactly that. Even the crew became worried because the risk felt too high, but Clint stayed focused. For him, this wasn't acting. It was another moment where he had to survive and push through the danger. But Clint's journey toward fame started long before any of these films. In 1956, he appeared silently in the massive epic The Ten Commandments. He was just one face among 15,000 extras. But director Cecil B. DeMille saw him during a beach workout and instantly noticed his powerful build. DeMille gave him a tiny part as a Sardinian guard. It seemed like nothing, just a walk-on role, But standing next to Charlton Heston in that moment changed everything. Warner Brothers noticed him and moved quickly to sign him. That tiny part opened the door that eventually led him to Cheyenne and launched his career. By 1966, he starred in Night of the Grizzly, a movie that pushed him to his limits again. This time, he wrestled a real 600-pound trained bear inside a freezing cabin during a night shoot. It took 12 takes to get the final scene right. Every time the bear grabbed him, its claws left real marks on his skin. The intensity on screen came from actual danger. No one watching the movie could doubt that. The film wasn't perfect, but its realism made it a cult classic, and Clint's performance became unforgettable. In 1967, he joined the cast of The Dirty Dozen, playing a battle-hardened sergeant. While filming in England, he was involved in an accident when a grenade prop misfired. The explosion burned off his eyebrows and sent the crew into a panic. Filming stopped as doctors checked him for injuries. But Clint insisted on finishing the scene before taking a break. The movie eventually became one of the biggest war films of the decade, making around $12 million. Behind that success was a man who faced fire, explosions, danger, and still kept moving forward. Then came one of the most shocking moments of his entire life. On May 24, 1971, Clint Walker was skiing at Mammoth Mountain. He was going down a steep slope when he suddenly lost control. He began tumbling down the icy hill, unable to stop. He slid nearly 400 feet. During the fall, one of his ski poles stuck in the snow with the sharp end pointing upward. His chest hit the pole with full force. The pole punched 5 inches into his chest, tearing through the protective sac around his heart. The injury caused a deadly condition called cardiac tamponade, where the heart gets squeezed from the inside and can't pump blood. Clint managed to shout once, but then everything went dark. By the time the ski patrol reached him, his skin was turning blue. They rushed him to the nearest hospital in Bishop, California, a small town about 45 miles away. When they checked for a pulse or blood pressure, they couldn't find any. The doctors pronounced him dead. But moments later, another doctor walking past the room saw a tiny movement in Clint's chest, just enough to show he wasn't completely gone. They reacted immediately. The hospital had no surgical room available, so they took him to the basement and began an emergency operation with whatever tools they had. For more than 2.5 hours, Dr. David Sheldon and Dr. George Brown worked directly with their hands to remove blood clots and try to restart his heart. There was no anesthesia. There were no advanced machines. They weren't sure he could survive. Clint had been clinically dead for minutes, but his massive chest and powerful body gave him one more chance. The doctors massaged his heart until they felt it beating again. Later, Clint said he had an out-of-body experience during the surgery. He said he felt like he had floated above the room and could see the doctors working on him. He felt peaceful and calm, without fear. He said it felt like he understood things he had never understood before. Then he felt a pull, not painful, but strong, like something important was calling him back. And so he returned. Only 8 days later, Clint Walker walked out of the hospital on his own. The doctors expected him to take months to recover, but he had no brain damage and healed faster than anyone thought possible. He spent only a few more days at UCLA Medical Center and then went home. 2 months after almost dying, he was back on a film set riding horses and performing action scenes for the movie Baker's Hawk. He had a long scar on his chest held together by 20 stitches, but he kept moving forward. Doctors called his survival a miracle. Fans from around the world wrote him letters about faith, hope, and strength, thanking him for telling his story. Clint said faith had helped him survive, and gratitude kept him going. But even with his survival, the pain didn't disappear easily. Clint had already been through so much by then. In the 1960s, while filming Cheyenne, he had pushed himself past limits. He smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day to deal with stress from 16-hour filming days. It damaged his lungs and made his voice rough. Some days, he had to take short breaks just to catch his breath. When he finally quit smoking, he believed that decision played a big part in why he survived the ski accident later. After Cheyenne ended in 1963, he went through a difficult time. He felt stuck, like the world only saw him as the cowboy and nothing more. Fame didn't fix the emptiness he felt inside. He even thought seriously about leaving Hollywood forever. He imagined disappearing to a quiet ranch in Montana and living a simple life without cameras or pressure. But something always pulled him back. Work, responsibility, expectation, or maybe the belief that he still had more to prove. During those years, drinking became another struggle. After his marriages fell apart, he spent time in Las Vegas doing smaller shows and appearances. The environment was rough. The long nights, bright lights, loneliness, and temptation made his drinking worse. He drank whiskey almost every night. His daughter Valerie later shared that the alcohol changed him, and the family felt it deeply. Clint always looked strong on the outside, but the inside was breaking slowly. By the mid-1970s, he made the choice to focus on healing again. He didn't want to live as a damaged version of the man people admired. He didn't want to continue falling into the habits that hurt him. But his struggles weren't only internal. Hollywood was filled with its own dark secrets. The casting couch wasn't a rumor, it was real. His agent, Henry Wilson, was involved in the dark side of the business. Wilson pressured actors into doing things they never wanted to do, offering roles in exchange for disturbing favors. Clint was aware of this side of Hollywood, and it left deep shadows behind the glamorous image people saw on screen. Through it all, Clint Walker kept fighting, whether it was through pain, danger, accidents, heartbreak, or inner battles. The world saw a hero, a giant, a legend. But behind the cameras, he was a man navigating survival, strength, mistakes, and redemption. His story was never just about cowboy hats and stunts. It was about endurance, courage, and carrying on even when the world thought he should have fallen. Clint never said anything happened to him personally, but he knew the stories. He heard the whispers about Hollywood's dark side and the things agents like Henry Wilson were known for. Wilson had represented actors like Tab Hunter and Rock Hudson, and his agency had a reputation that made many young actors uncomfortable. Clint had been around those circles, especially at the Sands Hotel where many deals and secret arrangements happened. He stayed alert and cautious because the whole atmosphere made him uneasy. After his skiing accident, that sense of worry only grew stronger. His close call with death changed him, and he started going to therapy because he couldn't shake the feeling that Hollywood always had its eyes on you, ready to take advantage if you slipped. The accident opened his heart spiritually, but it also opened a wound that he never fully healed from. He tried to focus on his health and keeping his life clean, but he never looked at fame or people the same way again. He became quieter, slower, and more thoughtful. He stayed strong, but there was an unspoken change in him that anyone close to him could see. Clint Walker was only 21 when he married Vera Garver on September 5, 1948, in Illinois. Their wedding wasn't glamorous or flashy. It was a simple ceremony far away from anything Hollywood. At that time, Clint wasn't famous. He was just a tall young man who'd spent time in the Merchant Marine and had taken jobs like being a bouncer while trying to figure out what to do next after World War II. Vera came from a warm, modest family and had 3 sisters. Her relatives worried things were moving too fast between them, but Clint had a charm that drew her in. He would tell her stories about being at sea, weathering storms, and surviving dangerous moments, and she felt connected to his strength. They married quickly because it simply felt right to both of them, not because of any pressure or scandal. Their daughter, Valerie Jean Walker, was born on May 15, 1950. Clint was still looking for steady acting work, doing small jobs and auditions wherever he could. Everything changed in 1955 when he landed the lead role in the show Cheyenne. Almost overnight, their lives were different. Clint worked long hours on distant locations in places like Utah and Arizona. But instead of leaving Valerie behind at home, Clint and Vera kept her close. In 1957, while filming on location, Clint homeschooled her himself, something very unusual for that era. Most Hollywood parents left their kids in Los Angeles, but Clint wanted his daughter to stay grounded and away from the noise of the industry. He wanted her to have a normal life. Valerie grew up independent, quiet, and uninterested in being part of the Hollywood scene. Instead, she loved airplanes. She was fascinated by flying in a time when most girls weren't even encouraged to drive certain cars, let alone fly planes. Clint supported her completely. In 1966, when she was only 16, Valerie began taking flying lessons. 2 years later, at 18, she flew solo in a Cessna 150. She took crop dusting jobs to build flight hours, earning more than 100 hours in her first year alone. But 1968 brought another big change. Clint and Vera divorced quietly without public drama. There were no scandals, no bitter court fights. It was simply the result of years of distance caused by Clint's long shooting schedules and the pressures of fame. Vera didn't ask for alimony and stayed independent, while Clint stayed devoted to Valerie. Even though the marriage ended after 20 years, the respect between them remained strong. Valerie's flying career continued to grow. By the early 1970s, she was teaching flight students, and more than 50 people trained under her. From 1972 to 1975, she joined the LAPD's aerial division, flying helicopters over Los Angeles. She was one of the first women in that kind of position, and the work was difficult. She flew low-altitude missions, tracked suspects, and faced pushback from male officers who didn't think women belonged there. But she proved herself through skill and calm focus. Then she took her talents even farther. In 1974, Valerie became a bush pilot in Botswana and South Africa. She flew into remote areas, landing on rough dirt strips surrounded by wildlife. She once had to wait for hours in her cockpit because an entire herd of elephants blocked the runway. She dealt with dust storms, engine problems, and emergencies where she had to stay calm or risk lives. Those years showed how fearless she truly was. When she returned to the United States, her life reached another milestone. On March 8, 1976, she became the first female pilot hired by Western Airlines in her class. She went on to fly DC-10s across the country. Many in the airline industry weren't ready for women pilots, and some male co-workers tried to challenge her or undermine her confidence. But she didn't argue or react. She simply flew with professionalism and skill, and eventually even the doubters respected her. She wasn't trying to be a trailblazer, she just wanted to fly. By the time she retired from Delta Airlines in 2005, Valerie had logged more than 20,000 flight hours and flown aircraft like the Boeing 727, 737, 757, and 767. Retirement didn't slow her down. After the events of 9/11, she created a self-defense system for flight crews called unfalling, combining martial arts with aviation safety. She personally trained over 1,000 airline workers. She never sought attention, she simply wanted to solve a problem she saw in the industry. In a 2025 interview at age 75, Valerie spoke about how much her father's near-death experience had shaped her. Clint had survived a terrifying accident in 1971 when a ski pole pierced his heart. He was declared dead for 2 hours before a doctor noticed faint signs of life. He later told Valerie about the out-of-body feeling he had during the surgery and recovery. That moment stayed with him for decades. It changed her too. She used the lessons from his survival to help create emergency flight drills for pilots, believing that what he lived through could help save others. Clint's personal life had many struggles. Throughout the 1960s, alcohol became a serious problem for him. Long filming days ended with whiskey, and there were times when he would disappear for days. Valerie later spoke about the fear she felt waiting for him to come home, unsure what state he'd be in. He had blackouts and dangerous moments, including a near-fatal car crash in 1967 that put him in the hospital. These incidents never made the news because friends and family protected his privacy. Clint always managed to show up for work, but the strain on his body and mind was real. On top of that, he was a heavy smoker, going through nearly 2 packs a day through the 1950s and 60s. He kept it hidden from producers because he worried they would replace him. It wasn't until a lung scare in the 1980s that he finally quit for good. After that, he spoke openly about his struggles with smoking and warned others not to fall into the same habits. Before Cheyenne, Clint faced another kind of pressure. In the early 1950s, he was signed by agent Henry Wilson, the same man who managed stars like Rock Hudson. Wilson tried to reinvent Clint with the stage name Jet Norman and push him into heartthrob roles. Clint hated it. He felt like the industry was trying to turn him into something he wasn't, and he sensed the manipulative side of Hollywood that preyed on young talent. He cut ties with Wilson quickly, but the uneasy memory stayed with him for years. Even Valerie later said that her father never fully got over the feeling of being treated like a product instead of a person. Clint's second marriage came in 1974 when he met Giselle Hennessy. They married on May 26, just a few weeks after meeting. They stayed married for 20 years, and she brought a peaceful, private balance to his life. She wasn't involved in show business and preferred quiet support behind the scenes. Her death from cancer on January 1, 1994, devastated Clint. He withdrew from public life for a long time to grieve privately. In 1997, he married again, this time to Susan Cavallari. She became his final partner, and they built a gentle life together. Clint opened up to her about things he rarely spoke about: the 1971 accident, the scars on his chest, and the emotional toll of everything he had survived. Susan stayed by his side through illness, aging, and the quiet days when fame had faded away. Clint Walker passed away on May 21, 2018, at the age of 90 from congestive heart failure. His daughter Valerie told the Associated Press that he died the way he lived, with grit. Throughout his lifelong career, Clint appeared in more than 50 westerns. Cheyenne, which aired from 1955 to 1962, became the defining role of his career and solidified his reputation as one of the most iconic cowboy figures in television history. In 2025, he was honored again at the Western Film Festival, and his star still rests proudly on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, a reminder of a man who lived through danger, heartbreak, and miracles but kept standing strong until the very end.